You're welcome back. This is Face to Face on ChannelOne television. My guest is Member of Parliament for Accra Kumasi. He's Minister of State in charge of Government Communication, the Honorable Felix Kwakye Ofosu. You're welcome to Face to Face.
Thank you, Umaru.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm holding up by God's grace.
Around this period last year, what was going through your mind, knowing that you have won a bigly margin, by a very bigly margin, to quote Donald Trump?
Well, I had become the newly minted MP for the Accra Kumasi constituency. I had barely got any sleep, because we were at the collation center from around midnight to around 9 a.m. So the results had been declared. Indeed, only this morning I was reminded of a Facebook post I made announcing the outcome of the AAK results. The victory was the outcome of intense campaigning.
So your place was declared before Baumia's concession, or
yes,
after?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
By 7 p.m., we had determined through our own collation that we had won.
And then you have to then move to
we
Accra.
had to move to the collation center at the AAK District Assembly. And then when the declaration was made, I had to make my way to Accra for the President Mohammed's official acknowledgement of the results. No sooner had that been done, did the call come in for me to be on the transition team to serve as spokesperson for the John Mahama side of the transition team. So there was little rest for me at the time. And
because you were already his spokesperson and aide before the election, right?
Well, that is true. That is true.
And so while you were in the constituency, you were also looking at the national picture.
Absolutely. I recall calling Dr. Mani around 11 p.m. on December 7 to ask him where we were in terms of the coalition. Then he told me we had garnered around 56% at the time. I recall expressly. So I knew. I went into the coalition room at the AAK Assembly fully aware that we were on our way to victory.
Oh, so your eyes were not just on your election?
It was. I mean, it was all well and good to win the parliamentary seats of AAK, but more important, it was the urge to ensure that we had achieved victory at national level, so that we could salvage the country from the complete doldrums that it was in at the time. So when he broke that news to me, I went in there confident that perhaps the assignment had been completed. We had won on both fronts.
It's 1 year. That night when I stood in the studio here to make the announcement of the results that were coming, I was in shock. I mean, things weren't looking good. It wasn't surprising that the opposition party would win the election, but the magnitude of defeat was too huge. Constituencies that had never been green went green. And these were Sekendi, Takrady municipal area. You know that they've never gone green. All of them. And when I announced Mesa had lost, Bernard thought I was crazy. Have you come to terms with the size of victory that you garnered? And what do you attribute that size to?
Well, we came to terms with it pretty quickly. First of all, it was not our first victory in elections. Yes, there was something to be said for the magnitude of victory. Let me indicate that our internal posters had been telling us that was the outcome to expect. Okay. There were times when we doubted it a bit. We were in no doubt whatsoever that we were going to win the presidential elections. It was the margin that surprised us a bit, even though periodically we got information that things were going to tilt that way. But we had to wait for the day itself to be certain that had been achieved. But whereas it was an overwhelming victory, it was also a humbling one for us, because then it told us that the Ghanaian people had come to the point where they were not going to countenance any form of bad governance, and that they were willing to punish it severely. And that is what they had done to the MPP. The signs were clear. The Ghanaians were unhappy about the way that they had governed, that their total destruction of the Ghanaian economy, which had plunged millions of people into hardships, was something that they could not be forgiven for. The general levels of bad governance, the corruption, blatant theft of public resources, the arrogance of power, and all the ills of government clearly had a telling effect on the way that people voted. And so for us, even as we reveled in the victory and celebrated, it was a cautionary tale for us to do better. And that is what we have sought to do since we came to power.
You had a lot of goodwill when you started, but one of the first things that people started taking you on was the decision to sack people who were appointed. The question was, okay, they were appointed, midnight appointment, but they were still Ghanaians. So why would you sack people who have been given jobs by the government? And I think that's one of the bigger issues that you have had to face.
I think that it was not the fact that they were appointed at midnight that was the problem. The problem was that due process was bypassed. In fact, I recall putting out a statement on 18 January on behalf of the Mahama side of the transition team.
18 December?
18 December, I beg your pardon, yes. Indicating our concern about the way that this last minute recruitment had been done. First of all, be reminded that it was the MPP that in 2016 first kicked against the notion that the government had been voted out of power, even though officially had not handed over, could, as it were, make some recruitments into the public and civil service. They took issue with that. We went back and forth. So we did not expect that, having lost power, they would do the very thing that they complained about. But what was more surprising was that due process had not been followed. We got information that there were some that had not gone through the processes. First of all, the positions had to be advertised. People had to apply. And then a process is put in place to screen and select the best. So interview processes had to be undertaken. Some had to write aptitude tests. Others too had to go through medicals.
So they bypassed
all of this. There were some who never applied for the job and yet received appointment letters. So it was important that we looked into that. So we, in that December 18th statement, we cautioned that if these matters that we had actually brought to the attention of the MPP side of the transition team did not stop, we will be compelled to review what they had done. And that's precisely what we did. So it was not that...
Could you have said that, well, the appointment may not have gone through the procedure, but they have been appointed anyway.
No, but
so
let's take efforts
Umaru,
to
rectify
process
that.
is important. The second point too is that that kind of activity saddles the public purse with some additional responsibility. So it is only fair that the government that is coming in has a handle on exactly what is being done. Okay. Because, mind you, the budgetary allocations that had been made by the previous government covered only up to the first quarter of the year. Subsequent quarters were going to be taken care of by the budget that we, as an incoming government, put forward. Okay. And once this had not been done, it placed us in a very serious situation. But the point is that due process was important, so that you make sure that those who get into those positions are qualified. So the process was reviewed, and a committee was put in place, headed by the chief of staff, or by the chief of staff, to look into these appointments and see those that merit recall and those whose appointments were clearly fraudulent and did not go through any due process. So once that process is completed, I think that the right things will be done. Those who deserve to be reinstated will be reinstated. Yeah.
Just a point on the victory before we proceed and look into the things you've done so far. I interviewed Nana Komia, who played a key role in the Bawumia government campaign and still playing a role in his campaign. I interviewed him last night on Eyewitness News, and he said that Dr. Bawumia's concession was a major democratic feat that has to be celebrated globally. And that when John Mahama lost in 2016, he did not concede magnanimously like Dr. Bawumia did, and that should be celebrated. I don't know if you can make a comment on that.
Komia clearly spinning. That is propaganda. First of all, Dr. Bawumia is not the first person in the history of the Fourth Republic to have conceded ahead of the EC. Professor Mills did that in the year 2000. In 2024, the NDC considered defeat again. Professor Mills once again considered defeat. In 2008, President Akufo-Addo didn't do that. He put us he put us into a very tense situation, where at one point by midday, the central business district of Accra had been completely abandoned. People had fled because of the tensions that had arisen because of President Akufo-Addo's refusal to concede defeat when it was clear. In 2012, President Akufo-Addo took us to court. He did not concede defeat. He took us to court. We spent 8 months in court. It was after the court verdict that he conceded defeat. In 2016, President Mahama conceded defeat well in advance of the Electoral Commissioner's announcement of the results. So anybody who tells you that President Mahama did not concede defeat is partly false.
He said Otumfuo had to
call
him
and
impress upon him.
Again, it is not true. President Mahama is a consummate Democrat. He didn't need anybody's prodding to concede defeat. What it says is that you need to have the results collated and get to a point where you see you have no chance, I beg your pardon, of bridging the gap before you do the concession. And once it got to that point where we realized that there was no way we could close the gap, President Mahama conceded defeat. Indeed, I was standing beside him when he did that concession. Okay. So the claim that Dr. Bawumia has done something novel is not true. The other point is that the magnitude of defeat was such that nothing could be done about it. And it was in his own interest that he did that, to spare himself further agony. I told you that by 11 p.m. of December 7th, we in the NDC knew the exact amount of votes we had gotten. And I'm sure they also had the calculations, so they saw it. So he was left with no choice than to do the right thing. Okay. So, and it is not novel. I've accounted a history of all of this. So, Nana Komia and Co. should mitigate this tendency to hype what happened beyond reasonable doubt. Of course, it helps. It helps to calm down tensions. It helps to diffuse any worrying situations that may arise because of the longevity or the time it takes for the conversation to be had. But to single it out as something unprecedented is simply not true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said that you had to come and rescue Ghanaians from, you used all manner of adjectives against the previous administration. How have you fared in the 1 year based on your own assessment, for instance, on governance? So you said that they were not accountable, there were so many things, and Ghanaians gave you the money. 1 year on, what remarkable change have we seen? Or should we point to and say, oh, Mahama came and we've been saved?
Absolutely. Look at the economy, for instance. Indeed, Umaru, no matter what anybody says, the economy was the #1 issue for the people of Ghana, and all the polls that preceded the 2024 elections showed it. And we made a clear commitment. It's in our manifesto. In fact, the very first pages of our manifesto captures that point. And we made clear commitments to reverse the economic decline that the NPP had supervised. And indeed, the figures show that that has happened. There's been a 360-10 in the fortunes of the Ghanaian economy. Every available indicator shows progress. Growth is good. Inflation is at 6.3% from a position of 23% in January this year. We hope, indeed, the finance minister is confident that it will even go lower than the current figure that we have. Look at our debt position. One of our biggest problems was the sheer size of our debts. Our debt has reduced by between 60 to 70 billion Ghana cedis. Our debt to GDP ratio has moved from around 61.8% to 45%. Indeed, we had programmed to achieve that by 2045. Sorry, by 2034. That has been done 9 clear years ahead of time. At a point under the MPP, around 2003 or so, 2023, the debt to GDP ratio was in excess of 100%. It was 104%. If you compare that to what we have now, you see that there's been a clear improvement. Look at the exchange rate, for instance. Last year, 2024, the Ghana cedi depreciated by 27%. This year, it has appreciated by between 34 to 37%. The cost of living, which was the biggest problem that Ghanaians confronted, has also gone down. I mean, fuel prices have come down, transport fares have come down, and I've said this, I'll repeat it. There is data that shows that the prices of up to 4,500 different items have reduced. And everybody who lives in Ghana sees this sort of benefit. I mean, if the cedi was exchanging for the dollar at 17 in 2024 or at the beginning of this year, and today, even in forex bureaus, you get between 11.5 or 12 Ghana cedis, and our interbank market is around 11.4 Ghana cedis. It is a remarkable improvement, and that in itself allows for the cost of living to be driven up, because then at least the items that we import or those things that are manufactured with foreign inputs do not escalate beyond reasonable limits, as we saw under the MPP. So on the economic front, I think we have achieved the objective of turning around
the indicators sound very nice, but the question is, what did you deliberately do over the past 1 year to have resulted in this? I've heard members of the MPP say the foundation they laid is what you are benefiting from. They talk about gold for oil, for instance, and all.
Umaru, I don't know which foundation that was laid would account for what we are doing. First of all, what foundation did they lay? So you need to look at where we were when we were in power. After all the cries about, or the hoopla, the hue and cry about gold for oil, the price at the pump was higher than what we have today.
Yeah, but they were starting. They were not
starting. What? They had been in power for 8 years.
They introduced
it
at last
Umaru,
minute.
They had been in power for 8 years.
Yes.
At least we had heard about gold for oil for about 2 years before they left power. But what was the outcome? The outcome was that when we went to the pump, at a point, diesel was selling at 23 cedis at the pump, and petrol was around 19 cedis or so. That is the results that the MPP achieved. By the time we came to power, it was between 14 to 15 cedis a gallon at the pump. And later, I beg your pardon, at the pump. Now, that is not the situation. The cedi, there is talk about some gold accumulation that Baumia is supposed to have initiated. There's the very same person who says he knew nothing about MPP economic management. Says that he was responsible for the gold accumulation policy. Again, the contradiction there perhaps contributed to the huge defeat.
But so the question
but
would
I was
be,
coming to the point.
What did NDC
so I'm coming.
do?
The point is that, first of all, the key factor that underlines economic development or economic performance is fiscal discipline. Our history shows that fiscal indiscipline has led to cyclical economic crisis. By 2021, it had become clear that there was a huge hole in our finances. The MPP had achieved a budget deficit of in excess of 15% at the end of 2020, which had created a huge hole, which then led to the accumulation of more debts, which led to debt unsustainability, which led to debt defaults, which then impacted our currency and led to hardships. So to make progress, you need to reverse these things. So the first thing you look at is discipline, staying within your means. How do you do that? So you have revenue, which you match against expenditure. You are allowed a certain percentage by which you overspend. And when you set that target, you must keep within it. The NPP programmed that we were going to do what we call a primary balance. In other words, if you look at our revenue and expenditure, and you took out the fact that we had to service our debts, they said we were going to achieve a surplus of 0.5%. When they left office, it went around 3.5% or so. They did not meet that target. We set a target of 1.5% surplus. When the finance minister read his budget a month or so ago, it emerged that we had actually achieved 1.6%. We had done better than we projected. Same can be said for the budget deficit, which is a straightforward calculation
but they said that
of
you are not,
the difference between your revenue
you are not spending,
and your expenditure.
you are not spending at all.
It is not true, Umaru.
That is why we are seeing the point. And
Umaru,
that the day you start spending,
it is not true.
We're going to go down.
We are spending, but we are being fiscally prudent. When you read the budget again, the finance minister indicated that he had some shortfall in revenue, but he had corresponding cuts in expenditure. So he kept within the limits that he has set for himself. Under the MPP, when there was a drop in revenue, they ballooned expenditure. So the whole increase. Now, to curb that, you need to pinch yourself and stay within budgetary limits and spend in the areas that matter. Okay. It is not true that we are not. So let me show you that why I say we are spending. So what are the key points of expenditure in Ghana? What are the key items that government spends money on?
Construction, salaries.
I beg your pardon. The big one is salaries. In fact, if you look into the budget of 2026, as presented by the budget finance minister, 90.5 billion Ghana cedis will be spent on public sector salaries. If you look at the budget that he read in 2025 and its implementation, look at the allocations made to education, allocations made to the District Assembly's Common Fund, allocations made to the NHIS. You speak to NHIS people, they will tell you that for the first time they have money sitting in their accounts. But it is rather the health service providers who are lagging behind in terms of the presentation of claims for payment to be made. In the past, we had a situation where they had capped the NHIS, and even the little that was due was not being released. So if you speak to Dr. Bampo, he will tell you that he has money in his accounts waiting for service providers to come and claim. If you go to the District Assembly's Common Fund, and I always say this because I have practical knowledge of it, I'm an ex-official member of the AAK District Assembly. So I know that last year, 2024, the total amount of money that came by way of Common Fund was 298,000 Ghana cedis. This year, by the second quarter, the same assembly had received from this government 6.5 million Ghana cedis. So because of that, they are able to do projects, at least 8 of them. Okay. Now we are well on course.
Where are you cutting the expenditure from? Is it political? Okay, so the political appointees, for instance, how have you cut the expenditure?
First of all, the part of the budget that you cut, if you have to, is what we call discretionary spending. There is some expenditure that you are forced to do.
Yes.
That's almost statutory. But there's what we call goods and services, which essentially is what government institutions and agencies run on. But it is discretionary. You can decide that this year ISD will be given this amount of money to run the office and manage the place. But you will cut out some items because it is not absolutely vital. What is absolutely vital is the wages.
But you frustrate them if the goods and services are not coming.
No, that is not the case. That is not the case. Indeed, there have been increases in the goods and services allocation and disbursement of ISD as I speak to you.
So
but the point I'm making,
what I mean is
if you let me land, yeah.
Okay, specifically, what did you say?
So if you let me land, so if you check the goods and services budget as presented by the finance minister, he has spent less than he said he would. In the past, we spent more than we budgeted for. And then there's capital expenditure, which essentially drives procurement. So that there too, we restricted it to essential items, things that matter, education, health. So you go to education, for instance. The biggest expenditure item there is free SHS. Before this government came to power, on a daily basis on your news and current affairs program, you had people lamenting, headmasters complaining, parents complaining, students complaining about non-release of funds for feeding, for instance. Every now and then we hear about schools closing down because monies have not been released for feeding. Since we came to power, have you heard these noises? No, because between the beginning of this year and now, close to 1.5 billion Ghana cedis has been released to feed school children. In addition to that, other expenditure related to FSHS have been met, and because of that, you are not hearing the noises. I've just given you the situation with NHI. When was the last time you heard of service providers complaining about releases under NHIS? When you go to the common fund, the assemblies are receiving this, but there are assemblies that have received up to 13 million Ghana cedis this year. When last year they received under 1 million Ghana cedis. And when you go around, you see projects coming up, because that essentially is what the common fund is supposed to do. Okay. So money is being spent. That's why it is being spent in the right places. But if you are talking about general procurement, where things that we can do without are forced on the government payroll, on the government expenditure, and balloons it to the point where we run deficits and we have huge arrears that we have to. Let me give you one final example. For instance, go to the energy sector. Before we came into power, the situation at ECG was dire. In 2024, they had programmed to spend just around 900 million Ghana cedis on procurement. By the time the year went to an end, they had spent over 7 billion Ghana cedis, or committed ECG to expenditure of over 7 billion Ghana cedis. Indeed, they had imported cables that they would not need for the next 15 years.
So you're preventing that? Okay.
Now, that has been brought under control.
Okay.
And so you see that when ECG gets money, they are able to honor the cash waterfall mechanism. Well. And all players in the sector are getting something. So the secret has been fiscal discipline, staying within budgetary limits and ensuring that the monies that are being disbursed go to the areas where they are needed the most, in the social sector, education, health, and what have you.
This is face-to-face on ChannelOne television. Staying disciplined is what he has said, is the reason we are seeing what we're seeing. But explain how you're going to build a road, a brand new road from Accra to Kumasi, and how is that going to affect the budget and also expenditure generally when you already have a road that you have not completed. I'll ask that when we come back. Plus, we'll talk about governance itself, how they have fared. Please stay with us. Welcome back. This is Face to Face on ChannelOne television. I am Umaru Sanda Amadu. My guest is the Chief Government Spokesperson, Minister of State in charge of communication. You've explained how you are managing expenditure, for which reason we are seeing the successes we are seeing. Why are you creating an entirely new road in a forest area? I mean, we already had a road. You could expand it. You could make it 7 lanes if you want. Why build a new parallel road? It doesn't make sense.
Well, I'll come to that. But I think that one of the major campaign promises that President Mama put before the people of Ghana was a big push agenda. And since we've been in power, at least 43 billion Ghana cedis has been earmarked for that expenditure. 13.9 billion in 2025 and 30 billion in 2026. Indeed, as I speak to you, there are about 30 different routes that are at various stages of construction. Some of those roads are roads that we inherited, that the MPP, as usual, left no money for, did not leave any funding mechanism for. So that has been packaged and added to new roads that are being constructed, and there are about 30 of them. As I speak to you, the finance minister has close to $1 billion in an account dedicated to that. We have said that we will not pay mobilization, because there are instances where contractors have been paid mobilization by the MPP government and they have not done the work. However, if a contractor raises a certificate after having done some work and it is certified to reflect the actual work done, within a matter of 30 days, the certificate will be honored. And the finance minister has made that very, very clear. So those who claim that big push is not being done because mobilization has not been paid are clearly in the wrong on that one. Now, this year, too, another 30 billion has been allocated for big push roads to be constructed, because roads are one of the biggest problems that we have as a country. Now, the major arterial roads, that is the roads that exit out of Accra and connect various major cities in Accra, require significant attention. And indeed, recently, about a month or two ago, the president cut the sword for work to begin on the Cape Coast to Takoradi road. It was about a 70-kilometer stretch. The work that is being done between Kasua and Winneba has also received additional impetus, and you can see that it is going on quite well, and it's expected to be completed within reasonable time. Now, the Accra Kumasi road has been a long-standing bottleneck. For many, many years, it has become something of a death trap. Every now and then, there's some digging or some construction that is supposed to be going on, but never gets completed. President Mahama has indicated that those works will be continued. However, it has become necessary because of the constraints on that route and the dangers that it poses and the number of lives that are being lost on a daily basis. It has become necessary to open another corridor, which is shorter. It is less than 200 kilometers, 197 kilometers. But this will be a modern expressway that will have facilities that will aid rapid movements between Accra and Kumasi, with various other facilities along the stretch. And every country that has developed has done so by creating expansive infrastructure that facilitates the movements of goods and services and people, so that you can have rapid economic development. And that is precisely what has guided the decision to open this new corridor and construct this new expressway.
But why not finish the existing road?
First of all, Umaru, you cannot say that you will finish everything before you start something new.
No, I mean, so the Suhum one, the main road,
yeah, but you can see that work is going, indeed.
Yeah, so why don't you just focus on finishing that one? Why do you have to create an entirely new road?
The evidence shows that we are continuing the work on the Accra Kumasi road. Indeed, the Ofanko to Nsawam road.
Yes, they are doing the asphalt.
Absolutely, because we gave 800 million Ghana cedis to the contractor sometime this year. The MPP said they had sourced money from external sources to construct that road, and yet were unable to mobilize all the resources required to pay the contractor. When we came to power, one of the problems that emerged immediately was that the contractor had stopped work, and an unbearable level of traffic buildup was recorded on a daily basis. This was exacerbated when the rains began, and it was a terrible sight to behold any time that vehicles plied the road. So it was absolutely imperative to do something quickly to free up the road. And indeed, $70 million, equivalent to over 800 million Ghana cedis, was paid to the contractor, and that is the reason why you see that they are asphalting significant portions and now traffic is flowing.
So if we're finishing that,
then there are bypasses which are also being done.
Yes.
But even when all those are done, it will not be enough to address the problem, the bottleneck on that road. And there's a need for this expressway that is being done. There are several
because you want to leave behind a legacy road so that everybody will say that this road was built by. Because you give yourself 3 years to build that.
When you put your car on that road and you get to Kumasi in under 4 hours, let's say 3.5 hours, because my understanding is that it will choke almost an hour of the journey to Kumasi. When you do that, it would have enhanced your experience on the road. It would have facilitated your movement, and whatever it is that you are going to do in Kumasi will also be enhanced. So the benefit will come to you directly.
But the cost of building that road and the fact that you've given yourself a 3-year timeline,
just between,
knowing that we have roads that have been there for decades.
Just between Accra and Nsawam, or Fanko to Nsawam, we have spent $70 million to allow the contractor to open up that stretch. $70 million. So even that is expensive. So road construction It's an expensive business, but it is absolutely necessary for economic development to make that kind of investment. And that is the reason why President Mahama committed to the big push agenda. And so far, he has committed in excess of 40 billion Ghana cedis to that particular policy.
Let's talk about
13.9 for 2025 and 30 billion for 2026.
Let's talk about unemployment. Yeah. We saw the recent deaths as a result of the recruitment by the armed forces. Now, a lot of the people who came, they were simply looking for jobs.
That is true.
And we keep seeing more of that in all the other services. How are you and how will you address the unemployment problem in this country as a government?
Of course. There's no doubt that second to the economic problems that the MPP created and saddled Ghanaians with, the next biggest problem was unemployment. And indeed, the last set of data that became available before the elections showed that up to 2 million Ghanaian youths were without employment. So we were always aware that unemployment was going to be a major issue that needed to be tackled under us. For that reason, measures are being put in place, some of which have begun already to address the problem. First of all, even the investments in road construction, other construction activities creates employment, because there are people whose job it is to engage in construction. They are masons, artisans of all types, steel benders, welders, what have you, who take part in the construction of these roads. And so through that, you create employment for tens of thousands of people who otherwise will be home without doing anything. We also have an apprenticeship program, which we have dubbed National Apprenticeship Program. The objective is to ensure that over the next 4 years, at least on a yearly basis, we have about 100,000 people put through apprenticeship. And indeed, being an MP in a rural community, and between 2020 and 2024, when I was campaigning in AAK, on my own, through my own efforts, I was able to ensure the training of about 2,000 young people, because I distributed sewing machines, hair dryers, and what have you to them, and they learned a trade. And so every now and then I get invitations to attend graduation ceremonies of these people. And I noticed that it resolved the problem of unemployment to some significant extent, because those same people who used to come to me for assistance suddenly stopped because they had found something to do. So we committed ourselves to expanding this National Apprenticeship Program, and it's something that is ongoing. 300 million Ghana cedis was allocated for it last year. This year, another 150 million Ghana cedis has been set aside for 2026, and that is ongoing. There's a Jumeirah project, which essentially aims at creating self-employed people, because it's not every time that you need to work for someone. There are times when you can work for yourself and also employ others. That one too has started with a target of about 10,000 people, with a view to growing it as we go on. You know, the Women's Development Bank, to provide microcredits for women who want to engage in some trade or some other economic activity. Through that, you create employment for them. The finance minister announced 100,000 acre palm development projects. And the analysis that has been done shows that for every acre of palm plantation, you need 3 people to work on. So we are talking 3 times 100, that's 300,000 people if that project comes to fruition in the medium to long term. So all these are policies that have been implemented to ensure.
More specifically, your party people who toiled under the sun and campaigned for you, a lot are disgruntled. They say you have not given them positions, you're not giving them appointments. Even your MPs in parliament, a lot have not been given positions.
Everybody knows, including our party people, know that there's only so many people that will get into government. That is a truism. They are not in any doubt that not everybody within the NDC or without it who helped in some way, shape, or form during the campaign will get an appointment in government.
But the MP people are laughing at them. How so? After all this,
how so? Well, was the MP was the
Felix Kwakye
was the MP able to employ every member of their campaign teams, everybody who campaigned? So it is not possible. I don't think that there's any reasonable expectation for that to happen. However, members of the NDC are also Ghanaians, and so they deserve the same opportunities available to everybody. And so all these programs that I have highlighted are open to all of them. Once the opportunities become available, I don't think that we would even be selecting people on the basis of their party cards. The idea is to ensure that as many of our young people as possible who are currently saddled with unemployment find opportunities through various interventions across various sectors, so that at the end of the day, they're able to earn some reasonable income that enables them to fend for themselves and their families. That, for me, is a more realistic and sustainable approach to the problem of unemployment.
You mentioned national health insurance, and that takes me to health sector. So I want us to know what you're going to do with Agenda 111, which is a project that was left behind for you. But there's a story on citynewsroom.com published in June.
Sure.
Government targets construction of 600 chips compounds by end of 2025, and that's attributed to you. The year is ending. Where are the 600 chips compounds? That's the question many people ask.
Yes, as part of the reforms that we have carried out in the disbursement of the Common Fund, President Mahama has instructed that a minimum of 80% of the monies in the Common Fund should go to the districts. When we took over power, the NPP had a policy where they used to make huge deductions at the center, so very minimal amounts went to the district assemblies. And I told you about the experience of AAK. Only 298,000 cedis came the whole of last year. So we've sent about 80% of what the district assemblies Common Fund accrues to the district assemblies. Now, in order to guide the disbursement of these monies, the utilization of the monies, and to align them with the overarching objectives of government, Cabinet developed guidelines on how the monies should be spent. So we have something called the 24-hour economic markets, where in areas where they do not have decent market centers, and when you come to AAK, we hardly can boast of any decent market center. The district capital, Abuja, has a market that was built somewhere in the 60s, and clearly it's out of shape. It's in a state of disrepair. So a major commitment was to get them a new market. So this 24-hour economic market has come in handy, and the same will be applied to areas where there are no such markets. So that's, and up to 25% of the Common Fund was earmarked for this sort of activity. Indeed, as I speak to you in AAK, they've already, found a piece of land that is being cleared for the purpose, and very soon construction will start. So one of the items in the guidelines was the construction of at least 2 chips compounds in every district, and we have 261 districts. So we are talking over 500, close to 600 chips compounds. Now, the reason why this is necessary is that starting from next year, we are implementing the free primary health care, which was a major campaign promise. Essentially, it is to ensure that basic minor ailments, headaches, rashes, stomach aches that are not serious and all that, are treated at the most basic level of health care, which is the CHIPS compound, and then perhaps the health centers. To do this, you need to have the infrastructure in place. So this guideline was sent to all the assemblies. I know that they are complying with it. Indeed, in the case of AAK, I can report that all things being equal, by the end of this year, we should commission 2
chips compound.
Chips compound, one at Nyamedom, one at Ohia. But indeed, I've gone to inspect them. The last time I was there, they were almost done.
This year will end in 3 weeks.
Yes, and the contractor assures that by December 20th, it will be done. As I speak to you, procurement processes have begun to buy equipment to equip those 2 chips compounds. And I know that the same applies to almost every district in Ghana. Indeed, the local government ministry should be updating us in the coming weeks on the outcome of this. So it is a promise.
You are the one who anchors the government accountability series. True. Would you invite the Minister of Health, or which ministry will be
responsible for the Minister of Health has been there about
or is local government?
The local government minister.
Someone who can answer specifically on this 600 chips compound.
It is the local government ministry
that
is coordinated, because it's an activity being undertaken by the District Assembly. Of course, they do so in close collaboration with the Health Ministry to guide the operational procedures.
So when can you give us a specific...
by the close of the year, they should be able to report on it. Perhaps early next year, the first quarter of next year, they should be able to report on that. But I know that it's an activity that is ongoing.
But everywhere. The 600 have not been done.
Oh, but Umaru, if I tell you that 600, and again about 600, certainly in excess of 500. I have given you the example of AAK.
You've given your place.
Absolutely.
So, and I
know that is same is taking place everywhere. So they are at various stages.
Okay.
So by a certain point, they should be completed.
Okay.
And I'm saying that it is not a random policy initiative.
Very well.
It is targeted at helping us.
I got the basis.
Implement the free primary health care policy.
Yeah. What are you doing at the National Cathedral? It's 1 year on. It's still a big hole.
Again, I still maintain to this day that it was an absolutely misplaced priority. You see, the president of the land at the time, at the height of economic difficulty, when Ghanaians were struggling, and his government, despite his assurance that there will be no haircut, had implemented excruciating haircuts in respect of about 1.3 million bondholders, told everybody that his biggest priority as president, indeed,
priority of priorities,
was priority of priorities.
Yes.
Was the building of a $1 billion cathedral.
Yes. So now my point is that 1 year on, what are you doing with it?
I think a few months ago, I held a press conference. At the time, the National Cathedral Secretariat itself had commissioned an audit, which had revealed very worrying patterns of procurement breaches and misapplication of public funds. That called for further investigation. So the Auditor General, working in collaboration with the Attorney General, have commissioned the forensic audits, which we know are underway, I beg your pardon. Once it is completed, we will know exactly what has been done where. But the president has indicated
too much
no,
time?
but you need a forensic audit means that you have to delve deeper.
It's 1 year.
No, it's not. It's been only a few months. Indeed.
No, I mean since you took office.
Yes, but you need to allow a reasonable amount of time for that to happen, because the process has to be thorough. You have to find out everything. If somebody presents an invoice, you should be able to go behind the invoice and find out exactly what has happened, where the money has gone to, and who has done what. So once that is completed, then we'll be in a position to take other decisions. But what is clear is that we cannot commit $1 billion of public funds to build the cathedral, and the president has made that quite clear. And so once the report comes in, government's position will be clearly stated. But what I can assure is that public funds are not going to be used to support $1 billion cathedral. The president has made that very, very clear.
This is Face to Face on ChannelOne TV. My guest is the Chief Government Spokesperson, Minister of State in charge of Government Communication. The next issue I want to bring to his attention is, even though the president himself has spoken about not wanting to go for a third term, people still keep talking about it. The Constitutional Review Commission has sent his report. I asked him emphatically what the president is thinking. And also the Office of Special Prosecutor and the Jean Mensah, chairperson of the Electoral Commission, petitions, are they trying to remove them like they removed the Chief Justice? That's the question I'm going to ask. Please stay. You're welcome back. This Face to Face on ChannelOne TV. In assessing 1 year, removing the Chief Justice is a major thing in any republic. It goes down in history as your government supervising that. Even though you have explained that you went through the constitutional process, everything is correct. The woman herself is challenging it. She's gone to the ECOWAS court. Many people say you plan to do this and you have executed it, and now you're going to visit same on chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Jean Mensah, and the Special Prosecutor, Kisei Jabin. How do you respond?
Well, those people would have to provide evidence to show. It's not enough to just claim that we have plotted against these persons and have either removed them or are about to remove them. You have to provide evidence. As I speak, there's no evidence to the effect. You see, it does not matter how big or small one is. When the law catches up with you, the law must take its course. If you have a country where people are excused from wrongdoing on account of how weighty their position is, you are headed for a banana republic. So in a country where the rule of law works, it does not matter how lofty your position is, from the president to the messenger. Once you do something that violates Ghanaian law and there's a prescribed sanction, it ought to be applied. What matters is that due process has to be followed. And that is exactly what happened in the case of the Chief Justice. The President did not write the Constitution. So he abided by the letter and spirit of the Constitution. So that those who say are making these claims are unable to point to a single infraction of the constitutional process. So there's really no basis for that assertion. In respect of the Special Prosecutor and the Electoral Commission chairperson, as I had cause to confirm to you last week, 10 separate petitions have been received. And the Constitution is clear that on those matters, the President must simply act as a conveyor belt and send same to the Chief Justice for any further action that he may deem necessary based on constitutionally prescribed actions. And that is what has been done. That is where the President's role in this ends. The rest is up to the Chief Justice to kick the necessary process into motion.
We saw a by-election in Akwetia. We saw a mini-election or rerun in Ablekuma North. I think that is a constituency you once
Yes, but that's where I was born.
Okay, which was Dakuma?
Dakuma, yes.
Now we have a by-election, unless anything changes in the northern region. Forgive me, the name of the constituency just escaped me. Matthew Nyendam's constituency, Pandai.
Yeah.
What assurance can you give us that the security situation we saw in Ablekuma North will not repeat itself in Pandai, and generally security in this country?
Oh, I think that the Akwetia by-election proved.
Has vindicated you.
Exactly, and it was peaceful. It passed without incident. So,
yeah, but this one you are more aggressive.
Oh, no, there's no aggression. What it is
like they say you are collecting their seats from them by force.
You see what it is? First of all, sometimes the MPP itself.
So you are going after them.
The MPP must pinch themselves and wake up from the slumber, the self-imposed slumber that they appear to be under. They went after Jachikwesi. Indeed, bizarre court rulings were handed down in the Jachikwesi matter. Even before the matter had been exhausted, he was barred from working as an MP. Even before the matter had been conclusively determined by a court of competent jurisdiction. So we went to a by-election assembly, did we not? We won, we prevailed. In fact, he prevailed by a wider margin than he did in the general election that brought him to parliament in the first place. So if the MPP has a right to petition against the conduct of an election in a constituency and pray a court to strip a member of parliament from the office that he occupies, why are they complaining when another person who feels aggrieved by the outcome of elections goes to court and the court makes a pronouncement after hearing the matter?
You are doing tit for tat.
There's no tit for tat. I'm saying that the same process that they went through to have Jachikwesi's seat declared vacant
is what you have
has been applied by the NDC primary candidate who lost or who was said to have lost in 2024, and the court has vindicated his right. How can the MPP purport to be angry at this? You see, they must show respect to the people of Ghana. They cannot say that when one court pronounces that there should be a by-election at Senate, we should jump and sing hallelujah. But when the same High Court pronounces that there should be another election in Pandai, then all hell must break loose. You see, nobody takes someone who flip-flops like that seriously. And it will do them a world of good if they remain consistent and take the electorate more seriously.
We need to go. Sure. In a minute, by the next December that you and I sit down for an assessment, what will be one major thing that will be done in 2026 that Ghanaians will say hooray?
Well, I think that we will see more of the big push.
So more roads.
Our roads will be in a much better shape than
the motorway will be nice.
The motorway, clearly work would have
the express, the new expressway that you've gone to do, nobody has sent you, you've decided to build, you will build.
No, it is necessary. That's why it's being done. When Kwame Nkrumah wanted to build the motorway, I recall there was a graphic front page news item that appeared in the 60s that showed only one vehicle on the motorway. And at the time, the same Nankwabuzi elements were up in arms claiming that it was not necessary, it was a prestige project. You know, so similar things, and Asenso Boakye is known to have opposed the construction of that highway. Yeah. But the point is that it is necessary. That is why it is being done. Now, you asked about a third term.
President Mahama's third term, yes.
Again, the MPP have whipped themselves into a needless frenzy. President Mahama has stated emphatically that he will respect the Ghanaian constitution because he is a consummate Democrat. So there is no third term anywhere for him or any other person for that matter, so as far as the Ghanaian constitution.
Even if people go on street and demonstrate that, please want
anybody can say what they want. So the fact that people have gone on Facebook to express a desire for him to run a third term does not mean that that will happen. The man himself has said that I am not interested.
Very well.
So the MPP should stop wasting their time and everybody's time and purporting to be angry and whipping themselves into a frenzy. It is an absurd fantasy that they themselves are getting themselves into, because President Mahama has not expressed any such intent. Indeed, not only has he not expressed intent, he has actually stated emphatically, and it's on record, that he's not going to run.
Honorable Felix Kwakye,
any talk about it is a complete waste of everybody's time.
Minister of State in charge of government communication, MP for Abra Asebu. We didn't talk about your constituency.
Oh yes, the constituency is doing well. It's certainly doing much better than I took it in exactly a year ago.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Umaru Sanda Amadu. This has been Face to Face. We'll be back next week with more. Please stay with Channel One Television.